How can two brothers with nearly the same childhood, the same public tragedy, and very similar expectations have such massive differences when it comes to their relation to the same mental health platform? When Prince William speaks about emotional resilience, the public calls him grounded, relatable, and credible. When Prince Harry speaks about mental health, the reaction is complicated and definitely far less positive. The popular consensus is already pretty clear. Prince Harry is not taken very seriously in the mental health advocacy space anymore, while Prince William is widely respected as a leader in it. But I wanted to look at this on a deeper level, because this actually ties directly into PR and public image. Our perception of public figures is not formed by one moment. It's built over years of watching patterns in their behavior. And when you look at the long-term patterns from both brothers, it starts to explain why the public reacts so differently to their mental health advocacy. Now, I am not a psychologist, but I did come across some really interesting research and communication frameworks that help explain how audiences respond to leaders in the mental health space specifically, and why certain approaches build credibility while others undermine it. So in this video, I'm looking at this from an observational and communication perspective and breaking down the patterns in how William and Harry approach mental health advocacy differently and how that aligns or differs from their behavior overall, and how all of that connects to and ties into our overall perception of each of these people and their public image. Recently, Prince William made comments on a podcast about emotional well-being, discussing the importance of talking about feelings, supporting young people, and normalizing conversations around mental health. And this isn't the first time that he has done it, but it was definitely a uniquely reliable format, and that's why I'm excited to share some of these clips with you today. The response to this was overwhelmingly positive. There were zero mistakes in what he said, and it was very relatable. Everything he said was relatable. And the comments were flooded with people describing him as calm, thoughtful, emotionally intelligent, trustworthy, and a natural leader in this space. And that reception really tells us something important, not only about what Prince William's doing, but about where Prince Harry may have gone wrong. Remember, this is not a new arena for either of these brothers. We mustn't forget, along with Catherine, Princess of Wales, both Prince William and Prince Harry were part of initiating Heads Together. And both of these brothers have spoken publicly about their grief and advocated for breaking stigma around mental health and supported emotional mental wellness initiatives over the years. But today, these two brothers are perceived very, very differently. And this video is not about relitigating the past and how we got to this point. It's about the psychology behind this story and how the public has reacted to these brothers based on their actions over the recent years. Why does one come across so much more emotionally regulated and authoritative, while the other has a reputation as very reactive, unsettled, even resentful? Because this...
Yes. I'm really, really sorry. We're sorry that you're here. You need to be here. But being here is making a difference. There is no version of where...
Okay? As I said, none of you should be here. So...
is very, very different from this.
You have a certain toolbox next to you, but no one has all the tools in it. Not one person in this world has all the tools for every eventuality your mental state is going to come across. It does normalize the idea that the brain just needs sometimes a little bit of help, but we can't expect to have all the answers ourselves.
Hi everybody, I'm Babes Kelly. Welcome back to another video. Before we dive in, I would like to invite you to subscribe if you have not yet already, and click the like button, the hype button, share this video, and comment below if you would like to. So in today's video, we are going to break down exactly how Prince William and Prince Harry have demonstrated overall mental wellness and health through their behaviors and how it has impacted their reputation and level of authority on the subject matter, because they both are continuing work in advocating for various mental health and wellness initiatives. When you're advocating or positioning oneself as a leader in any given space, it is incumbent upon you to set the example through your actions and to choose your words very wisely, especially in the mental wellness space specifically. A big piece of it is that mental wellness, mind state, and general mental health, your emotional balance and all of that is something that we can observe broadly in almost every way and in almost every occasion of how someone shows up. It can be tied to a little sliver of insight into that person's mindset. Everything they say can be, because we have these very subtle linguistic cues that sometimes kind of reveal our emotions or feelings or mindset on a certain manner. Even if we're trying to keep our opinion out of it, it can kind of slip through in tone of voice or body language or word choice. And so mental wellness and mental health specifically is so broad and so encompassing of our existence and behavior and how we show up in the world that it's almost inescapable from other things. You know what I mean? It's inseparable from your overall public presence. And that's one of the reasons why the perception of these two brothers has created such extreme differences in how they are perceived in their advocacy for mental health in general. Because we have all this data, if you will, from every appearance that we have seen and every action that these brothers have taken over the years that then we draw upon and use as painting our picture of how we view them when it comes to what they're saying about mental health specifically, if that makes sense. So have you ever heard of locus of control? It's essentially the difference between asking, what can I do? Or what do I do now? What am I going to choose to do right now? Versus asking, what was done to me? What has happened to me? Why has this happened to me? And I'm sure you can immediately categorize the brothers into these two separate categories because they each clearly exemplify these two different mind states. When Prince William speaks about mental health, his messaging oftentimes focuses on solutions, which is one of the things that I have said most frequently about William and Harry, that William is so solutions driven and Harry is so problems focused because it's so much easier to digest information about a problem or something that needs to be improved within our society, our community, or our culture, or even with ourselves, with our health, or maybe our job performance. It's so much easier to digest the discussion of what the problem is when it's prefaced by or more outweighed by the solutions. When we hear a lot of solutions about how we can fix something or help something or, improve upon something, along with acknowledgement of the problem, it's much less stressful. It feels hopeful. It feels more motivating. It's just generally much more positive and a better way to go about it. But when we're just staring at the problem and talking about how bad the problem is, then we're left feeling like we're at the bottom of a mountain that is too steep to climb, and we feel alone in it, and it's a big downer, and it's sort of stressful. And that feels like the exact difference between William and Harry. And it's something that I say all the time, that Harry just points at problems and talks to us about how bad it is, or how much he cares about how bad it is, or how stressed he is about how bad it is. And William is always focusing on the solutions and communicating the solutions more than he is acknowledging what the problem is. It's so solutions based and focused, the way his messaging is oriented and organized. And I cannot tell you how great that is and how much that impacts his public image, as well as the general ethos of our perception of Prince William as a person. But he also incorporates prevention and responsibility as themes in how he discusses these things. Even when he's referencing his own personal grief, he pivots towards systems and service frequently. When Prince Harry speaks, the narrative often centers on institutional failure, media harm, and past injustices that he seems to rehash over and over and over as if he's stuck there. And this video and this entire conversation about Prince Harry and Prince William's advocacy in this space and their authority on the matter is really kind of an example of their overall PR strategy and public image as well. Because as I said, it's so broad and encompassing in who we are and how we behave that it really influences how the public views you. All of these examples are also directly tied to their public image and their media relations and their overall PR, because good PR and curating your public image in a way that you're comfortable with comes down to discipline almost more than anything else. Being disciplined in your image and what you reveal to the public, expose to the public, say and do in the public eye is, for some people, the hardest part to PR and curating their public image. And William exudes excellent discipline. But neither of these approaches of the locus of control, the sort of two versions of this, are inherently wrong when contained within your own processing. Where it really gets sticky for Harry is that he puts all of this out there and he loses the filter of that boundary of what is healthy and appropriate tool to use and an okay thing to talk about in terms of what this tool is and what it might look like and examples of it, versus that boundary of what is acceptable to put out into the public sphere and what is appropriate for public consumption. Because the public instinctively trusts the person who appears to own their own forward path, not the one who's still battling the past. It's very tied to the feeling of rumination, this sort of, let me stop and continue to focus on these old problems. William has clearly provided examples of internal locus of control, while Harry has exemplified external locus of control frequently. And it's not that anyone is suggesting that we ignore injustice. It's that you should aim to shift away from why did this happen to me to what do I want to do now that this has happened. That shift from past-focused grievance to future-focused agency is strongly linked to resilience. It's more trustworthy, it feels more confident, and it's magnetic. And in leadership in particular, the public or the audience instinctively responds to that visible agency positively. So next, let's examine another contrast at play here, and that is containment versus catharsis. Once again, neither containment nor catharsis are inherently right or wrong on their own. Both are very normal reactions and responses to stress and a step in processing emotions or experiences. The issue lies in how it is presented and how much of this is revealed versus how much of it is simply part of your personal process. For example, Harry has a tendency to apply any conversation that he has about mental health or mental wellness techniques or anything of that nature to himself and get very specific about it for himself. Whereas William may talk about the same techniques and may implement those same techniques and speaks from personal experience without having to divulge the details of those specific experiences and how he worked through those specific experiences. Because ultimately that's much less helpful than discussing the process of working through something. Divulging the way Harry does, all the oversharing details, really doesn't help move the conversation forward or reduce the stigma at all. It's just oversharing his personal thoughts and experiences on something, and it negatively impacts public perception as well, because it's read as a lack of control, a lack of containment. Containment isn't suppression, it's selective, measured disclosure, only revealing things that are going to deliver value or that are necessary to illustrate a point. Catharsis is emotional release through full and complete total expression. An example of this: after the release of Spare, Prince William was asked publicly about the book's claims. His response was a brief, controlled, "We're very much not a racist family," and then he moved on. There was no extended rebuttal tour, there was no detailed counter-narrative. That is an example of containment at work. He addressed the issue, but he refused to emotionally amplify it or to emotionally engage in it. And it was something that was seen as a sign of strength, trustworthiness, and it was firm. He was like setting the record straight or laying down the law in a way that was so much more powerful and profound than anything I've heard Harry do ever. William said, "These are the facts. This is a fact. We are very much not a racist family. Period. End of story." There is nothing more to say, nothing more needed to be said. A masterful response and a perfect approach to the drama kicked up by Spare. By contrast, just one of many examples of Harry, in his Netflix series that he did with the Meg, Harry and Meghan, he said, when referring to media treatment of Meg, that I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself. That is an example of catharsis. He named a fear, he revisited that pain, and he was processing it publicly. Never mind the fact that he was way out of bounds and out of touch with the reality of the situation. So you can see the big difference here is what was projected out publicly versus what was kept private. There is no illusions here that William never had more to say. It's that he controlled his behavior and was strategic in what he did say, which also gives his words more power. When you hear from someone less, what they do say tends to hold more weight. It means more. And reducing stigma around mental health simply cannot be that we then obliterate our filters and always announce every thought and feeling that we have. And just one of many reasons why we can't have that become the standard is because it can damage other people's mental health. It can hurt other people's feelings. We have to be responsible with our words and our actions while still establishing a standard that privately improving emotional and mental wellness and within a group that is private to you is healthy and deserves no stigma. A lot of our feelings and a lot of our thoughts and a lot of our emotions aren't true, and they are just part of our process and part of this ebb and flow of our emotional and mental wellness. And so releasing every single thought or feeling or emotion willy-nilly into the universe, saying it out loud or telling everybody, is not a healthy approach. In this mental wellness arena, how many times have I said this already? This is going to be insane how many times I have to say mental wellness, mental health. In this space, credibility is not built on how much you express, because like I said, that is not an example of good, healthy, boundaries or communication or what have you. But it is built on how well you regulate yourself. And that's something that we can observe in these people over time, frequently, steadily, every time we see them. And the public instinctively gravitates towards whichever person, any person, who seems very steady under pressure. Reactivity is a big theme for Harry's behavior. It's a well-established pattern that I've talked about a lot. Harry and Meghan always seem to be reacting to everything, these knee-jerk reactions that aren't really well thought out and end up clouding or disrupting their public image. And it's a well-established pattern with Harry. He has a long history of snapping back at press headlines that he dislikes or filing frivolous lawsuits. These are all examples of Harry's highly reactive behavior. And although he frames them as accountability efforts, what they really do is keep grievances in the headlines, which makes it appear as though he's ruminating, and it reinforces a high-conflict narrative. Oprah, Netflix, Spare, and other interviews he did similarly. They encouraged the public to associate his public image with these high conflict, highly emotionally reactive sorts of behaviors. And his emotionality, combined with the airing of private grievances, demonstrated poor character, really poor judgment, and painted a picture of someone who simply can't control their emotions and doesn't have a good command of themselves and their own behavior. The public perception of that is obviously negative. In his security disputes, for example, Harry frames it as personal injustice. When the dominant narrative is, what was done to me? Look what has happened to me. Look how unfair this was to me. Audiences and the public in general may subconsciously interpret that as externalized control and emotional reactivity. But William, his approach projects regulation through restraint, controlled messaging, and long-term institutional focus. William has proven that he has priorities above his own fleeting feelings and emotions and sense of what was done to him, right or wrong, fair or not. he has priorities above that, and that is his family, the institution, his job, his life's work, his family's work. For example, after every media crisis, after every personal challenge like Catherine's health or the King's health, throughout every unwarranted attack by the Sussexes, William has never engaged in rebuttals or escalation. Instead, he carried on business as usual, demonstrating profound regulation under immense stressors. Emotional containment and choosing not to amplify conflict is a very strong signal of self-regulation. He prioritized that institutional stability over personal response. Harry has done the exact opposite, and William's public restraint reinforces those perceptions of stability, and it builds trust with the public. And this is something that we can observe in leaders as well. Like, we have seen leaders who are extremely emotionally reactive and who oftentimes do or say things or make decisions or initiate things that are simply rooted in an emotional response and reaction to something. The logic or reasoning be damned. And it's not a good look. We have also seen and experienced leaders who are extraordinarily calm under pressure and unfazed and make choices that resemble that restraint and are backed by logic and have clearly been thought through. And they are some of the best leaders we have ever had the privilege of witnessing. Listen to another clip of William here. Notice he uses a lot of we language in solution-based contexts rather than I language that's rooted in grievances. This tells us a lot. It's not only how he chooses his words wisely and the thought that he puts behind his messaging, but that his general outlook is more collaborative. It's more outward. It's more positive and solutions-based. His mindset seems to be that of a team, that of looking outward and community-based. In order for these subtle linguistic clues to flow like they do from William, it shows us that they're not scripted. They're not choices. It's an example that we can infer is influenced by his overall outlook and mindset being more outward focused. Whereas Harry uses so much I language and always ties things back to his own personal grievances or experiences or feelings, that we can infer his general mindset is very this was done to me, or is very self-focused and inward and navel-gazing, which can lead to and or represents rumination. I think even the imagery here is important to note. As you can see in these pictures of times where Prince Harry has been talking about mental health and wellness, he is alone and he is very self-focused. Whereas William is in this collaborative environment with many other people, including experts, deferring to experts, and importantly, he is outwardly focused and not alone. This is an illustration. These images right here explain the difference between a positive approach to mental health and wellness and one that is probably not as helpful. William does connect to personal experience, like, for example, in this clip.
Not immune to bad days at all. I get plenty of them. I'm quite emotionally available, and I like that about who I am. You can't necessarily fix some of the stuff, and emotionally I find that very challenging.
So that's a sharing of his personal experience, but he immediately, quickly pivots back to these broader initiatives or messaging. The personal notes here are illustrating his point and supporting it. They're not changing the conversation's direction. When he's done speaking, it is punctuated on this outward concept, this healthier idea or approach, or this relatable struggle that we all share. Whereas with Harry, he punctuates on himself. So it really cuts the conversation and the ideas short. It stops the conversation because then it's like, oh, well, let's just come back here to just Harry or just Meghan. Meghan is guilty of a lot of this too. All of these things, all of this nuance across these different, interviews or public appearances and whatnot, matter beyond just how the brothers are perceived as individuals or within their respective advocacy efforts. It impacts the results of their advocacy efforts tremendously. Cultural change, including within the mental emotional wellness spaces, takes time. It's a long-term, slow and steady approach that is often the most successful, not emotional momentum or shock value. William's reputation in this arena has been built with steady consistency, and we have observed him through so many massively stressful occasions, continually demonstrating really great examples. He sounds like a really great and thoughtful daddy. When he opens up at times like these, it's incredibly insightful, it's inspiring, and it's very intelligent. Harry has developed a reputation as extreme because in this arena especially, he often focuses on the extreme outcomes that end up feeling like fear-mongering. He also comes across as less informed, like he doesn't grasp that his actions are not compartmentalized to the public. His behaviors in other areas don't personify mental emotional wellness, and so the lack of control then is difficult to respect when he wants to advocate for mental wellness or be seen as a leader in this arena, because he's not communicating that he actually follows through with those actions and examples the rest of the time. So when we zoom out on this situation, it's definitely not about who has suffered more or who has done more, as Harry seems to be fixated on trying to prove. It's actually about who appears most steady now, who appears to exude better mental wellness that we can look to and trust as an authority on the issue. Because as I said, in this mental wellness space, people aren't just listening to the words, they're scanning for clues, constantly asking, does this person seem grounded? Do they seem emotionally regulated? Are they settled? Are they confident in what they're saying? How are they treating those around them? How are they actually living these examples? And over time, those signals build and build and build or erode the authority. Reputation in the mental health space is not claimed or declared. It's earned. It's demonstrated. And over time, Prince William has clearly outperformed Harry. He doesn't center on himself. He centers on solutions. He doesn't amplify conflict. He models composure. He doesn't revisit grievances. He reinforces growth. That consistency really, really matters, because when someone speaks about resilience while visibly embodying steadiness, the public doesn't just listen, they trust in that person. And that's how authority is built and how leadership works. By contrast, when messaging remains anchored in past battles, through repeated interviews, legal fights, and personal disclosures, it becomes difficult for audiences to separate advocacy from agitation. Even if the underlying concerns may be real, the tone shapes the public image, and perception, in turn, shapes credibility. In this arena, people are looking for a North Star, someone who appears grounded and resolved and forward-moving and forward-looking. And right now, William fills that role perfectly. Not because he has suffered less or had advantages or anything of that nature, but because he appears serene and settled and self-assured and confident as all get out. And in conversations about emotional resilience, the person who seems steady under pressure will always command more respect than the one who still looks like they're fighting the war or too focused on their emotions, or who prioritizes their own personal emotions, thoughts, and feelings, as fleeting as they may be, over all else. So this podcast honestly was really, really good. I listened to the whole thing. I'll try to link it in the description box, but you can find it on the BBC One YouTube page. Some things that really stood out to me after listening to it was that Prince William really took up like way less than 20% of the airtime, quite frankly. He didn't dominate the conversation or anything like that. He wasn't the main facilitator of the conversation. It wasn't an interview of William. Really, the value and the focus was on the other guests' experiences and perspectives. It created a really well-rounded listen, not because Prince William wasn't dominating the conversation, but rather because there was such diversity to the discussion across the 5 different guests plus the host, who each delivered unique value. So it had the variety that really speaks to the issue of mental wellness as well, particularly amongst men and with suicide prevention in mind. When we as listeners or royal watchers ask, did this meet the goal that Prince William had of reaching the right people in a relatable way to reduce stigma and encourage conversation and encourage reaching out and things of that nature? It clearly did. And this here was a really illuminating moment. Stephen was asked about his documentary and had a little bit of a spike of emotion. He definitely needed a moment. And William jumped in to fill the airtime, which took pressure off Stephen, allowing him the time that he needed to then be ready to answer the question and rejoin the conversation. But William's contribution in that moment was so smooth and so natural, and it really helped to make it easier on Stephen, because everybody wasn't just waiting for Stephen to get it together and start talking again awkwardly. Instead, William filled that with another point that fleshed out the conversation a little bit and sort of bought Stephen the time that he needed. It was an expert move. So what did you think of Prince William's comments? You know what else I noticed? Side note, it didn't even feel like an interview with William. It felt like a real conversation and discussion that we just happened to overhear. One that was very balanced, very well-rounded, and clearly collaborative. It was incredibly insightful. And that tone that you walk away not feeling like it was an interview about William, but rather a discussion that we got to listen in on, is yet another aspect of what makes Prince William so likable once again. He didn't let it linger on just himself. He always brings a sense of, this is bigger than myself, and this is about embracing and connecting. And we never have that feeling with Harold and the Meg, no matter what they say with their words. It's always so self-obsessed, even when it's not supposed to be. When they're done talking, we just have the sense that they talked about themselves. With Prince William and Princess Catherine, it's not that way. And they truly are excellent role models. And I'm so grateful for that. We really do need more people who are just like good human beings that we can tell our children that they can look up to and that we can trust are good role models. Because there's not very many of them. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please leave in the comments what you think. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a happy day ahead. I'll see you next time. Bye!